Hi, everyone. I'm here today to talk to you about one of the projects we did for the Canadian Auto Show last year. It was called Acura Grand Prix VR, but it's a bit of a misnomer. It was actually a VR experience with like an AR counterpart. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the process of making that, some of the challenges we faced, some of the things that we had to overcome, design decisions that we made along the way. So for those of you who don't know, my name's Dave. I work at Globacore. And we are an interactive tech shop. I've been there for about 6 years now. A lot of the work we do is more on the VR spectrum. We do a lot of AR stuff, though. We do even like multi-touch tables and walls and stuff like that. Kind of all over the place. We got into gaming, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago now. Most of the work we do is for trade shows and events and stuff like that. And we found that gamification actually really helps to draw people into a booth and keep them engaged. So we got into some of that kind of stuff, and with that, we kind of ended up moving into VR again because it was just it's just one of those technologies at the time. It was new and it brought people into spaces. We're getting into AR. These days, we're actually getting a little bit into even machine learning, stuff like that. So that's kind of who we are in a nutshell. And I'm here today to talk to you about Grand Prix VR and the story of how we made it. But before we do, I wanted to kind of show you some of the projects that kind of led to us making it. A lot of the times, our old creative director used to refer to it as that we were standing on the shoulders of giants all the time. And for him, that just meant that we were standing on the shoulders of like ourselves from a year or two ago. We would end up like doing these projects and then we would build on it, and so standing on the shoulders of giants. So this is actually the very first VR project we ever made. This was called Paper Dude. We got the Rift, the DK1 headsets. We are, I think, in the first batch of people that got the Oculus, the Kickstarter-backed Oculus kit. And within, I think, about 2 weeks, we had built this demo out, and we had this video, and it kind of made its rounds on the internet. Some of the cool stuff about it is that we got the headset in, and immediately there was no positional tracking on the DK1, and we thought, I want to see my hands. I want to see, when I move my head, I want to see that, to feel that. So one of the very first things we did is we hooked up a Kinect to the whole thing so that you could see, we could do kind of like reverse positional tracking. It's kind of like what they end up doing with the CV1. They have the camera in the space and it does roughly the same thing, but they didn't have it back then, so we just kind of made it. The other thing that we solved kind of then is that movement inside of the space, because again, I mean, if you wanted to move in VR, it's like, well, here's a controller. And we didn't really like that idea, so we ended up hooking up a, what's it called, a Wahoo Kicker. It's like a fitness bike that plugs into a computer. And we were able to stream the data. They have an API, so we were actually able to talk to that thing and see just how fast you're pedaling and have the bike actually move in kind. So this was like the very first VR project we ever made, but it was also just like one of generally the very first VR projects that kind of existed. Like I said, we had this out and out on the internet within, I think, 2 weeks tops of like the first round of DK1 stuff coming out. And I'm pretty sure, I have to imagine that means that's also one of the very first cases of, positional tracking in VR based on that. Mountain Madness, this is one of the ones that we made. Actually, you can see the FITC logo. We made this for last year's main FITC, but it was actually originally a project that we did for VW at the auto show. The idea, and you'll see in just a couple minutes here, is that there is a giant 3D printed mountain, and you would hold your tablet in front of the mountain, and the whole white, physically printed mountain would like then come to life, and you would race your car up the side of the mountain. This was, I had fun with this. We told everyone that there was a very important backstory, that none of the game would make sense if they didn't read this all, and then all of a sudden it just starts, really going. So yeah, we're kind of goofy with it. This is what I said. This is the mountain. So once it scans it, once it finds the physical model, it kind of like overlays and does its thing. And then you race up the side of it. And it's not the very first project that we did in AR, but it's one of the cooler ones. It's one of the more recent ones, and it's one of the ones that like kind of helped inform some of the stuff that we do these days. The last one I'll show you, it's a bit of a curveball, but the reason why it's important, this is a project we did for Intel, I think 3 years ago now, maybe 4. And it was a VR game. It's this multiplayer thing where two people inside of a VR space were kind of like, shooting at these bugs, trying to fix bugs with the code was the idea. And the reason why this one's important to show is because it was our first attempt at what we called, what you do call asymmetric multiplayer. So I think it'll show it. Yes, this right here. So this is a kind of companion game, and the purpose of the game is twofold. It's fun little interaction that happens in its own right. You're actually by kind of like playing this little mini game. It's like a Guitar Hero style thing. And by playing the game, you're actually helping out the people that are inside of VR. You're as you compile the code, you're sending off this like kind of screen clear command that kind of destroys all the enemies on screen. But the other thing it does is that while you're waiting in line, there's something to do. People can line up and play this thing, and they're there for the VR thing, but there's something to do to keep you entertained while you're standing in line, which we'll come back to in just a moment. Acura, around I think it was like around August 2018. They came to our office and they were looking for, just demos of some of the stuff we've been doing. We do a lot of work with auto show clients, all kinds of automotive companies. And they wanted to come to the office and check out some of the stuff we'd been doing, some of the stuff we were interested in, and get some ideas for the auto show with the intention of having us make something. So we showed them a few things, and one of the things that they saw and they knew that we had made is a VR racing sim for Lexus that we had done, I think, maybe 3 or 4 years prior. It was our very first VR racing sim, and it did have a couple problems. So one of the things that we noticed is that at the time, this didn't actually run at a stable frame rate, which doesn't feel great inside of VR. Anyone that's done VR at the low frame rate knows that's suboptimal at best. And it didn't. It kind of ran all over the place. So it didn't help. It helped made people feel a bit motion sick every now and then. One of the other big things is that crashing inside of a VR headset, like as you drive and you knock into a wall, that makes you feel ultra sick, like super fast. And there's kind of no way around it. I mean, if you have a racing sim, then a car is going to crash at some point. And then the last thing is that a physics sim usually implies that there's a realistic racing model, I guess, like a physics model. So, as you take a corner in a realistic physics sim, like the back end could slide out and all of a sudden you're spinning. Again, like super not good for VR. It makes people feel really sick. So for all these reasons, we very gently tried to coax them out of the idea of making a VR racing sim. We didn't think it was a good idea. My wife actually tried it out. There was after the auto show, Lexus kind of took their thing on the road and they brought it to various malls and stuff like that. And they brought it to Vaughan Mills, and my wife just happened to be walking around Vaughan Mills and saw it and was like, "Oh, this is the thing you guys made, right?" And like, "Yeah, be careful." So she put on the headset and she tried it, and she said that she couldn't remember whether she made it to the very first turn or not, but it was somewhere right around that period. She took the headset off and was like, "Nope, I can't do it. It's making me feel too sick." So we don't want that. One of the things, too, is that Acura came back and decided that they are absolutely dead set on a racing simulator. We tried our best to talk them out of it. They were not having it. They wanted their racing sim. So one of the things that we decided early on is that more than anything, we need to make sure that players are comfortable inside of VR. That's always the mandate. But even design decisions revolving around like the speed of the car and handling and all this stuff that like Acura would probably normally have a bit of a say in and say like, oh, it needs to handle realistically and have like proper physics and all that stuff. Like, no, it can't. It absolutely can't, or people are going to be sick all the time. So with that understanding, we kind of got the production team together and kind of set out and got to work. So this is our team. On the VR side, it was me and John Grant over here. We made the actual main racing game. Morgan, who is kicking around somewhere, he's in the back there, I see him. He made the AR car configurator. Brendan was our main 3D artist. I kind of pitched in here and there, but he led on all the art. And then we had Armando. He did the database integration, which I will touch on momentarily, and you will see what that was all about. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're making something meaningful for the companion experience. At the time, Acura, their mandate was just we want a cool VR racing sim, and that was fine. But we kind of thought it would be cool to have a companion piece. Back to the the example with Intel. The auto show has super long lines all the time, and it's like a bunch of kids and like parents and stuff, and everyone's cranky and in line like 10 minutes for this racing thing, and everyone's all like bummed out about it. So we thought it'd be cool to have like that same kind of general thing. We have like a companion piece that keeps people busy and entertained while they're waiting to actually try out the main VR thing. But what does that look like? And we went through a couple different ideas. And one of the things we were thinking of is that it would be really cool if you could actually configure, so this was for Acura NSX, was the car model that they were showcasing inside of this thing. Wouldn't it be cool if you could configure an NSX, pick your paint color in your interior and all that fun stuff, save it, and then like play the game in your configured car? So that's kind of what we went with. We weren't necessarily sold on AR just yet. We hadn't really kind of gotten that far. But that was kind of like the general idea. We would make like an app that that would allow you to configure the car, and then you could race that car. From there, we kind of got into our internal design document, which looked a little like this. For us, it's just we wanted this to be a fun thing that doesn't make people feel like super bad when they play it. And like I was saying, the kind of like the less physicsy controls, the more kind of arcade style. Maybe not necessarily making a full-on Mario Kart clone or anything like that. I doubt that they would sign off on that, but like something like that, They like the idea, with the exception of like, well, you can't make it look like Mario Kart, you guys. Fine, fine, whatever. Next up was we had to figure out where on the XR spectrum we were kind of looking to make this thing. It could have been like, a HoloLens app. It could have been, an AR app with a tablet. We weren't entirely sure yet. So we kind of went through that and kind of tried to figure out like what exactly we were making this AR companion piece with. As an aside, and it actually helps kind of inform some of this stuff, we get this a lot at the office. Every once in a while, there'll be like a client that comes along and they have big ideas about what they want to make, but also how, like the technology they want to use to make it. The one I hear often, or like heard often anyway, after the HoloLens came out, there was a lot of clients that would come to the office and say, okay, I have this cool idea. It's going to be on a HoloLens, and you're going to put the headset on, and then all of a sudden the entire world around you is going to change. And it's like, no, you're describing a VR thing. Like that's not a HoloLens experience. But like they get stubborn sometimes, and they are sure that that's the right way to do it. Having this chart is actually like a really helpful thing, because you kind of show them something like this, and you go like, okay, well, what you're advocating here is something that's completely digital. It completely replaces the physical world with digital content. That's virtual reality. Like that's what you're talking about. And if you stick to stuff like this, like like a graph like this really helps. And even just like my internal mantra that I try and convey is like, well, the experience dictates the technology and not the other way around. So if you are saying this is what you want to do inside of the space, like we'll figure out what hardware is the right hardware to use for this, and then back it up with the graph and say like, and it's not going to be the HoloLens, guys. So we settled on AR. We were going to use an iPad and kind of build out this AR tablet app. And the way it was going to work, we didn't know this at the time, but the way it ended up working ultimately is that we had these plinths that would sit in front along the way, and you could hold the tablet in front of it. There was a little sticker on the top of it, and by kind of looking at the sticker, the car would show up, and then you could configure it and kind of move around the whole thing. So as we were kind of like building it out, we were doing some testing and stuff like that. This was before I think we knew that we actually wanted to put it on a tablet. We were just messing around, and it's more fun to do stuff like this anyway. You can actually kind of like get right inside the car and stuff from inside the tablet. But one of the things that we were looking at is trying to just make sure that this is as realistic as is humanly possible. So we ended up using iPad Pros for this just because of the extra horsepower. And we were kind of using some new, at the time, features like, what's it called, light sampling. So it actually takes a light sample and even a reflection probe of the space that you're standing in and applies it back to the scene. So you can see like it's nighttime and there's like some yellow light and stuff like that. And you can see inside of like the reflections and just the overall lighting, it kind of matches. The one thing this is missing is some contact shadows, but this was like a work in progress. But this was kind of the basic idea. We had, the car and the paint options, interior options, all that stuff. So that was kind of like the rough idea for the AR configurator. Now time to try and figure out just what the heck we're doing with the VR side. And like I said, there's a lot of considerations for us. We want to make sure that we're not making people sick. So there was a few things, some more obvious than others. One of the less obvious ones was actually making sure that we pick the right track for the race. It's all just about trying to make sure to strike a balance between something that's fun and like hit some fun turns and like some nice straightaways and stuff like that, and something that's like not too complicated, because if it is and you're turning constantly, then people are going to get sick. So we ended up settling on the Monza circuit in Italy. You can see in a second here, it actually has like a nice blend of that stuff. It has some turns, but there's a couple tricky ones. There's some nice straightaways. We felt like it kind of like had a nice balance of some of the features we were looking for. We were able to make the whole thing flat too. That was another big thing. We don't want like as little movement up and down as possible because I figured like that's not going to help matters. So that's the track we settled on. The player controller, super important. So for that, that's again like that's some of the physics stuff I was talking about. Making sure that the turning is easier. When you hit a turn, like I don't want the back end of the car to go flying out from under me. I absolutely don't want the car to be able to flip under any circumstances, like nothing like that. One of the other things too, and one of the ways that we solve the crash problem, because it is a weird problem. We can't have crashes inside of VR because they make you feel super sick. But if you can't crash inside of the game, what are you even doing? Like, what kind of game even is that? It just keeps you in the middle of the path the entire time. So we ended up solving that. I was pretty proud of this one, actually. You send out at the front of the car, we have like a little raycast that's just looking forward, and it's measuring your speed that you're moving at, and it's kind of like looking forward for walls. And if it determines that the speed that you're moving at makes it so that like it sees that there's a wall there and there's absolutely no way of avoiding that wall, you're going to crash. It very quickly cuts to black and puts you back into the center of the track, and then you can carry on your way. I think you'll see it right here. Yep. It's like the back to Mario Kart. It's like the little dude kind of picks you up and puts you back in the center of the track. But it completely fixes the problem. Even me, who has like the VR legs, having done VR for like many years, I don't really get sick from a lot of stuff. I don't really feel that nauseous after doing too many things. But this is one of them. Like if you hit a wall, like it's the worst. But yeah, this fixes it completely. So that's a pro tip for you guys if you ever are in a position where you're making a VR racing sim. One of the other things that we ended up thinking was super important, especially for us, is that at trade shows, it's equally as important to make a cool thing as to have a way of showing that cool thing to attract people into the booth in the first place. And so for me, that actually was like a broadcast mode. I thought it was like really cool the way that this stuff works. They have like their fixed camera angles and they have like cameras mounted on the cars and stuff like that. And when a race is actually happening, you have something that looks like this. I decided that was ultra important, and I started working on a system like that. And it kind of looks like this. So this is like an in-progress shot. It's like super early in the game, but there was an array of cameras that just were positioned all around the racetrack. And as you entered into different zones, it would figure out like, okay, well, am I mounted to am I doing a view like this right now? This one's like mounted to a car. And if so, then wait a little bit and then switch over to this camera and then switch over to this one. There was like this whole little AI system built out to figure out like which camera it would switch to back and forth. But we had this playing on a TV, all hooked up to the same experience as the actual VR game, which looked really cool, and it kind of served its purpose of being like this really nice attract piece. The one problem with this is that this is all running off one computer. So now I'm rendering something like 3 times, like left, right eye, and then this thing, which I'm not doing myself any favors with that whole like stable frame rate thing. But at this point it was already done. I had made the thing and everyone thought it was like great. So it was like, okay, well, this is a lock. We're going to have to just make this work. Kick myself silently. So again, solid frame rate, crazy important. It's honestly the single most important thing to get right in VR. Without this, no matter what you're doing, you're going to not feel great by the end of it. And like I said, we had this dual screen setup now, so like we're rendering this image like 3 times basically. So it was really difficult to get right, but I feel like we got there. It was a lot of optimization on our end. So for us, that meant looking through every single texture in the game, combing over it, and like reducing every single one of them, like to just like, this is as small as we can get it without it like looking bad. On a channel by channel basis, like this normal map is okay at this resolution, but the spec map has to be this one. So really going over it with a fine tooth comb. One of the other things we did was mesh baking, batching items together to reduce draw calls, stuff like that. What was the other one? There was another one. Oh, shaders. For the most part, we're using the Unity. We use Unity at work. We use the standard shaders, which are great for like real-time stuff on PC and stuff like that. But for this, we actually went through and selectively put mobile shaders on various things to just like help with the frame rate. They're less computationally expensive. So like for instance, the car still runs like on the proper standard shader. But some of the buildings around the background and stuff like that, they're using like some of those like lower cost ones, and just being like really careful about being selective about that kind of stuff. Because again, no barfing simulators. We cannot have it. We will not have it. Never again. So we get it running smooth. Got through the tons and tons of optimization we did, and we're kind of good to go at this point. We have an AR experience. We have a VR experience. It's time to put the whole thing together. The challenge with this is that it's not like these two things are networked. We wanted to be able to have multiple AR stations for multiple VR games and not have to say, oh, you're at this station, so you need to go to this one or that one or whatever. So rather than networking them, we kind of tied the whole thing together with a content management system in the background. The idea is that it's a basic passport program. So you would go to a registration desk and you'd fill out like first name, last name, email. Yes, it's cool if I get an email after I race or whatever. And they give you a little passport card. And then all you have to do is just walk over to the iPad and scan it, and it'll go like, oh, hey, Dave, what's up? Configure your car. And so you do and hit save, and then it sends it to like our database. And then same thing, when you go to the VR system, you scan and like, oh, hey, Dave, you configured this car. Let's go. Let's race. So we used a database system for that. And after that, the whole thing is connected and ready to go. So this is the kind of finished AR app. You can see in a second, or almost finished. There was like one last thing here that I noticed, is that it doesn't animate in quite right. So this must have been the version before the last version. But there it is. So you get your car that comes out, and you can kind of configure your car as you wish. Go to the other options. There we go. Yeah, so you can see like you can modify the interior and stuff like that. And then when you're done, there was other options too. So you could like, there were different view modes where you could like do a, here's the car in X-ray mode, and here's like some feature callouts and some stuff that like, you know, Acura was super happy about. Like we have like text and copy that makes them happy about features of this car. And then when you're done, you can just hit save, and then it saves it to your account, and then you're ready to come into the VR game. And this was pretty much the finished VR game. So like I said, we have our systems in place for the camera switching, that broadcast mode I was talking about. We got our VR mode all ready to go. One of the cool things actually too that I forgot to mention is one of the other ways that we helped with motion sickness is anchoring, I guess you would call it, for lack of a better word. The camera itself is positioned in such a way that there's always a part of the car that's visible no matter where you're looking. It helps anchor you inside of the space, and it really actually helps reduce motion sickness. One of the other things we did too is, because it's a racing game and you're wearing a helmet inside of the game, is that we actually put the helmet in front of the camera, so just around the edges, and you can just barely see it, but it's there, and it's like actually physically anchoring you inside of the space. You can't see it in this video, but it's just in the peripheral. And that's another like little tip, a little trick that we learned along the way that really helps. So the end result is, we take this thing to auto show, we get it all set up. Day one of the show is a zoo. Yikes, even now looking at that, it's giving me anxiety. Yeah, and then so the show itself went great. I mean, there was like, apparently from what I hear, this was basically the norm. The entire event is that this lineup is just around the corner the entire time. Everyone had a really great time with it. And the most important thing is that the feedback we were getting is that there wasn't actually any motion sickness, so it was like mission accomplished. We did it. Yes, we can make a VR racing game, which is good. I'm very happy about that. Yeah, so that was like the project. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you guys about, though, is that we, on this one, mixed XR technologies. We had our VR component, we had our AR component, and it really kind of got us thinking about like the future of some of that kind of stuff. Because there is value in it for us, and I think like for other people too. Like it is like a really cool idea to have like these asymmetric experiences where people are doing, this guy's doing one thing and this guy's doing another. So I kind of did a little bit of ideating on my own, patent pending. But was thinking about like the racing game I was talking to you guys about, the Mountain Madness physical model. You have your AR tablet. Wouldn't it be cool if you actually had a VR component to it? You had like a multiplayer race. There was two people racing, one on the AR tablet, and then on the AR tablet, you actually see player two who's racing inside of VR beside them. A person inside of VR can also see the AR car, and they're actually like racing on the same racetrack, just in a different way, you know? Wouldn't that be cool? I thought it would be. Cool design idea number two. RTS games, so like StarCraft or something like that. Games where you have like an above view of the battlefield. It'd be really cool if you had AR or even MR. I could picture this on a HoloLens with like your virtual table in front of you. You're like a field commander, you know? You put the headset on or whatever it is, and you can kind of command people like to all these different spots. And you have your VR hero unit that isn't actually like a computer player, so you can't necessarily like just force them to do whatever. But you can like set waypoints and say like, hey, you should go here. There's like stuff over here. Like join the battle over this way. I thought that could be a pretty compelling thing. I thought that could be kind of fun. Lastly, we've actually done a couple of escape rooms in the past. I really like doing them inside of VR. We get to do stuff you can't necessarily normally do in a real escape room, even just like changing lighting and particle effects and all this cool stuff. And it's really, really fun to do. It would be cool if we could make one that that blended VR and AR together. So like, you know, for instance, you have puzzles where inside of VR there's like half the puzzle, and inside of VR there's the other half, and the two have to talk to each other in order to solve a part of it in order to like continue on. That would be really cool. I'd really like to make something like that. So those are my thoughts on just kind of like thought starters, I guess I would call them, more than anything. Yeah, that's about it from me. I just wanted to say thank you. Remember to check out our cool tweets. And I think I have a few minutes open for questions if you have any.